I'm Rustom Lawyer, CEO of Augnito, based out of Mumbai, India. So clinical documentation has a great history. Doctors would spend huge amount of time writing, perfect notes in their handwriting on a piece of paper. Generally, this was a very difficult thing for someone else to read, but the documentation still had to be done. And in most healthcare organizations, you'd see piles of paper, piling up in their offices. But really, that information that was being captured wasn't really usable. You couldn't search it, you couldn't understand what histories were. Everyone had to carry around their medical reports. And then there was a huge digitization boom. I think in the US, there was a huge push with Obamacare, where they said that everyone has to, digitize their data. And what they were still finding was that there were billions of dollars being spent on medical errors because of wrong documentation. And this is a journey that's really now going to the next level. And voice is today the most powerful way to capture high accuracy medical reports. And today it's a totally new user interface where the latest AI technology is being used for computers to be able to understand what you're saying. So, when we communicate with our voice. And today, you're able to sort of communicate with your computer in a much more effective way with voice. And this is our field that we're working on, and we see great disruptive potential with this technology. So generative AI is a fascinating field. It really evolved from the area of deep learning, and in sort of 2017-18, someone, I think it was a Google engineer, who came up with a scientific paper called Transformers. And this really has the potential to bring in a more generalized type of intelligence. And I think there's unbelievable amount of use cases, but there are also a lot of challenges that do exist. I mean, for someone who's actually worked with this technology, I can say that whenever you're bringing something like this into the healthcare environment, you have to be extremely careful, because these technologies do have the potential to hallucinate sometimes. It can give you information which you were not expecting. So I think trying to sort of get the right type of clinical validation is very, very key, and a lot of testing needs to be done to actually bring this into the clinical workflow. But really, when we look at the opportunities, I think they're really vast. Today everyone's talking about a co-pilot, and I think you're going to have a co-pilot for doctors. We don't call this artificial intelligence, it's more really augmented intelligence. It's giving, it can give doctors the potential to make better decisions. You can get all your clinical and administrative jobs done in a much more easy way now. And, a lot of people know about the image recognition, that today, you can detect, cancers and so many different areas just through an image. And in fact, even in the fascinating field of voice, there's areas like voice biomarkers, which can actually detect disease just from the signal of the voice. So I think it's really opening up, and I think we're going to see a lot of applications coming in. So voice AI really is one of the hottest fields out there in the AI space. There's a ton of funding coming into the area. We as a company now today are starting to look at wanting to work with institutions and to start raising funds. We've been able to sort of fund this by ourselves up to date. I think the overall market is really running into billions of dollars, especially in the in the clinical space. I'll give you an example. The largest player in the market, Nuance Communications, was recently bought by Microsoft for $20 billion. I think it was the maybe third largest acquisition they've done. And this really shows you the potential of this market and how all the serious players in big tech today are actually looking at this. So I think it's great that there's Indian innovation that's being able to compete globally against some of these players. And yeah, I think it's just an amazing potential. In my first proper business called Scribe Tech, when I was 19 years old, that was a contrarian thought itself at the time. It was focused on the clinical documentation space, what we used to call the outsourced medical transcription industry. And we actually started off this industry in the NHS in the UK, which at the time in 2001 was starting to go through its own digitization boom. But there were questions around whether they would outsource files to India, being a UK government body. But we were able to navigate that and really become one of the most successful companies in that field. And it was during that time that we started dabbling in the AI space, because we were looking at, how do you automate, this large sort of BPO operation. And it was at that time that we had actually started working with some professors from MIT and even Sheffield University in the UK. And we started designing, a deep learning based speech recognition engine that we actually put into our business and made it sort of automate and make it a lot more sort of profitable and a lot more sort of lean as an organization. And it was really during that time that we understood the power of AI technologies and voice AI specifically. And it was in 2018, I was at a course at Stanford, where I started looking at, what next, what is the future. And that's the time when we actually, thought of Augnito and sort of conceptualized it and said that, there is a huge digitization opportunity in India. I think at the time it was underappreciated, how vast an opportunity this was going to be. So our technology, the way that it operates is that, it's developed on language models like, what we're hearing about so much in the market today. We've been developing language models and acoustic models for many years. So the way that it works is that a doctor can, highly accurately dictate out, whatever their medical thought is for the patient. And, that improvement in accuracy is something that a lot of our customers, come back and talk to us about. So this is the speech recognition part for the clinical, but there's a new technology which is the natural language understanding part, where it actually understands what's being said and has the ability to then structure the medical data automatically right there at source. So this is really a game changer to be able to capture your medical reports in a much, much more efficient way. So with the advent of generative AI, we've been able to develop a very sophisticated system, which is an ambient system. What this does is it's able to actually listen into the doctor-patient conversation and automatically create a completely structured note for the doctor. Now, this is something that doctors spend close to an hour or two every day having to do, rather than having to focus on the patient. So you can just imagine that, this is a clinically trained helper who's able to act like a assistant to the doctor and complete this most critical part of documenting their patient encounter in a very effective way. So we really see that this is a hugely powerful technology that's going to be used across the country. It actually works in all vernacular languages. Currently our technology works across 10 Indian languages. So it has the ability to understand a doctor-patient conversation, say for example in Hindi or Marathi. Then it can automatically create an electronic medical record note in English for the doctor to have a look at and to close out. So I really see this as really a huge potential. And we're a made in India product. We see this as a product that's going to be used all over the world. Today we have proof points in in the Middle East, in the UK, in the US. And we see Augnito as being really one of the very powerful technology companies coming out of India for the world.